So today we're going to be talking about reclaiming retrogrades, which is something that I have been working on and off for about 5 or 6 years. And I just want to give a little bit of a background as to why this became a topic of much interest to me. First of all, I have 6 retrogrades in my chart, including Mars and Venus. And so, of course, when I first started studying astrology, some of the things said about retrogrades did not sound very happiness-inducing or pleasing at all. And of course, and I started studying astrology about 46 years ago, which when I say that makes me feel very old. Anyway, so, you know, I didn't give it a lot of thought when I first started studying because, of course, you know, you're overwhelmed with the complexity and the nuances of astrology. And so it takes some time to really begin to work with something and to understand exactly how those things function through your life experience. So anyways, here we are. So some key points I want to mention before we get into the meat of the matter, the heart of my presentation. So I think it's important that you know that my approach to astrology is best described as purpose-centered. So when I look at a chart and I'm looking at what's in it, and it doesn't matter whether it's my chart or my client's chart, my attitude is, if this is the picture, the toolkit, the picture that's been painted, the toolkit that you have, how best can you use it? You can only go so far in terms of going past identification to actually application. So you are not your chart and your chart is not you. Let that sink in for a second. So for me, so it says here, because I wrote it, it enlightens you and you enliven it. In other words, there has to be a strong connection. It's a collaboration. You and your chart are collaborating. Everything in life cannot and is not always forward movement. So if we think about nature and how it functions and the ebb and flow, we realize that, you know, we can see the same things in terms of transits and progressions in charts, but I also believe that retrogrades offer a different opportunity, a new opportunity to see things from an internal point of view as opposed to an external point of view. When talking about retrogrades today, the focus is on the birth chart. Because of course this is a big topic and we're often really looking at, you know, how, you know, planets retrograde in transit and by progression, and it doesn't mean that you can't apply some of the things that I'm going to say today to to transits and progressions. How can you tell that Mercury just is stationary today? And I'm stumbling over my words. Anyway. So I also wanted to start with just some basic information. There is at least one planet in retrograde motion 80% of the time. So this tells you that the people who are born with no planets retrograde are rare. They don't make up the majority. When a planet is retrograde, it is at its apogee, the closest it gets to Earth. The average person has 2 to 3 planets retrograde. And of course, neither the sun nor the moon can ever be retrograde. So part of my purpose in doing this is to build a platform so that when we get to talking about what my perception of retrogrades and how they function is, we have everything, you know, my Saturn and Virgo wants that. So let's carry on. So I wanted to take a look a little bit at some of the traditions and astrological traditions around retrogrades, what's been said. Now, I did some research, and it runs the gamut. And I just wanted to put in, a few comments that give you a sense of what the building blocks have been in terms of the Western astrological tradition and retrogrades. So Ibn Ezra said, if the planet is about to reverse its motion, it forecasts unsuccessful consultation, difficulty, and destruction. Not likely to make us want to run out and buy a lot of retrograde planets. According to William Lilly, retrogrades will be riotous and vulgar when not well posited. Now, of course, we know that William Lilly's specialty was horary astrology, and he's most likely writing from that perspective. Now, when I read that, that did make me laugh. Other words he uses include delays, recurrences, returns to previous conditions, reversals of events. Now, I did want to say that I think that a lot of what the Western tradition reflects back to us about retrograde planets is very much connected to horary astrology, mundane astrology, any of the facets of astrology that require a measurement of external manifestation. In other words, what's going to go on in the outer world. And in those cases, retrogrades very well may function in this way. However, today we're talking about individuals and human beings, and really looking at the life of the human being or looking at the chart of a human being is not the same as counting beans. So in Hellenistic astrology, Paulus calls them impotent, ineffectual, and insignificant. Valens comment in talking about his comments come in reference to annual perfections, which is a timing technique for any of the people listening who are not familiar with Hellenistic astrology. And calling them weakened, restrained, hindered, giving only appearances and hopes. In other words, somewhat illusory. Other references describe delays in manifestation. Now, all this information comes from page 233 of Chris Brennan's book, Hellenistic Astrology, which for anyone who's interested in a short course in Hellenistic astrology is an excellent book. So where does this leave us? Well, if you take those interpretations to heart, it can leave you feeling a little nonplussed at best and discouraged and slightly overwhelmed, especially if you have personal planets retrograde.